Okay, welcome to Synergies Schminergies, the business podcast for people who hate business podcasts. I'm your co-host, Jeremy Schiefling.
And I'm your co-host, Rose No. And today we'll be talking with SB. She is the co-founder and CEO of Unshackled, as well as the co-founder of Green Card Inc. She's a leader in helping immigrants from around the world access opportunity in the U.S. So before we do that, wanted to, catch up, Jeremy. How have you been doing?
Yeah, things have been really exciting, Rose. I feel like there's so much bubbling up right now in the AI space, and then obviously in higher ed. We've been doing these boot camps, as you know, so just a really busy time. What's going on your end?
Exciting. School is actually over, so the term is over, which is exciting. That gives me more time to focus on the podcast and get more guest speakers, and that's always exciting. And then obviously I've been attending your boot camps, and that has been teaching me a crazy amount about AI that I did not know.
And just,
Yeah, that's
on the topic of our speaker today, Rose, I'm so curious. You must have so many international student classmates at Chicago Booth. How are they feeling about things? I feel like the world is so crazy right now, and especially to be an international student. What's your sense?
Yeah, my sense is that the world sucks.
Yeah.
Only because most people say the world sucks, but I am working with, I'm just going to say various companies where founders are also international, and they're very worried about having their name associated with the company or because they're on visas, right? And there's a lot of anxiety about what this means for their career. And that's kind of why I invited SB. I wanted to kind of understand kind of what people are facing, what the kind of questions they're having in terms of their career, especially in business school when, it feels like you have a lot of choices, but really you don't if you're on a visa. You actually don't have as many as people think. So it's an interesting topic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that even as someone who works with international students the way that I do, there's just so much that you don't necessarily appreciate, not just on the legal side, but the emotional side. Like the idea that basically your opportunities here are limited by all these forces outside your control. It's pretty maddening. Is that
No,
your
absolutely.
feeling about what's that like?
No, I have so much empathy for people who have to navigate the system, especially when they're in school. And then I've talked to so many who are like, "Ooh, I really want to be an entrepreneur. I really want to do this thing, but the only places that will sponsor me are, MBB or, finance companies that I don't really want to do in finance, but also it's the secure path." So it sucks for them. And then I actually have a friend who has been in the US for about 12 years and has been trying to get her mother to live here with her because she's been alone, right? She's from Bulgaria. So having to be here with no family for so many years has been tough. And getting her, I think her mom had to go through this process 3 times and got rejected twice. And this was the 3rd time. So we waited for a whole year as her mom's application was getting processed or whatever that means. I actually don't know what all of that means. And she's a perfectly normal woman, just wants to be here with her daughter. And it's really saddening. So yeah, it's a tough time.
Well, I say there's never been a better time for this conversation, given everything that's happening in the world right now. So super excited. And with no further ado, let's welcome our friend of the pod, SB.
Welcome to the show, SB. We'd love to have you talk a little about yourself and especially your first and last name, because I've been calling you SB, but I think that you go by something else.
Yes. I think my name has 10 syllables. I'm not even sure how many syllables at this point, but my first name is Soundarya in India. That's what you would say. In America, most people would say Soundarya. I think the craziest version of it I've heard is Sandy. Someone called me that at a coffee shop somewhere. My last name is Balasubramani, which is actually my dad's name. We don't have last names in southern part of India. At least my family does not. So you just take your dad's first name. That's why it's also very long. Wow, brief intro. Okay, I put this on my LinkedIn. The very first sentence is, "I'm the poster child for non-linear career growth," is what I wrote there. I think that's a very productive way of saying that I can be pretty unfocused in the last 10 years of my career. I've switched around a lot. Everything from being a researcher in a chemical engineering degree in undergrad to being a product manager at Salesforce to quitting that and becoming an entrepreneur and an author. And the last year I've spent it trying to be a novelist, meaning I just finished my 3rd book, which is my first novel. So
Wow, congratulations.
thank you. I think the common thread across all of this is just There are people who have a passion and then they follow it rigorously and do amazing work in that. And then there are people who discover their passion by experimenting a lot. I think fall in the latter end. I've just realized I have a lot of really cool passions and I want to explore each of them in certain phases of my life. So thank you for having me.
I love that. I think that there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's overrated to feel like you need to choose a passion super early on. So I love that. Can you share a little bit about your own like immigration journey along with kind of your career as well? Because I know I'm sure that has some play in like what you decide to do and everything.
Yeah. Oh boy, I've been on 6 visas so far. Everything from the B1, B2, which is a tourist slash business visa. I came to the US through a scholarship program in 2016, even before I came for my master's, B1, B2. Then I came on an F1, which is the student visa. Went to Columbia University and did a master's there. Graduated and switched to OPT, which is optional practical training. You're going to hear an alphabet soup of letters right now. So just, brace yourself. So B1, B2, F1, OPT, switched to H1B when I was at Salesforce. And then I quit my job and switched to a part time H1B. Most people don't even know that exists, by the way. So if someone who's listening to this is an immigrant, know that there is something called part time H1B where you can work anywhere from 1 to 35 hours a week. But we'll talk more. And then currently I'm on an O1 visa, which is a talent visa of sorts. And I also got my EB2 national interest waiver approved last year. It's a pathway to a green card. Wow, I am getting exhausted just telling you all of these things. But yeah, that's in a nutshell all the visas I've been on. I think that's a statement to every single time you switch to one visa, it involves a mountain of paperwork, stress, anxiety, needing to go through interviews at consulates abroad, not knowing when you'll get a stamping. So, yeah, I just think it's been a long journey.
Yeah, it just sounds like you said an alphabet soup, a crazy quilt, whatever metaphor you want to
Yeah,
use. It's a lot. And so,
exactly.
if you could help people understand just how crazy the system is there something you wish that everyone really knew about what this journey is like, what it feels like to be in your shoes?
What this system is. I mean, I will only talk about skilled legal immigration since that's my area of at least knowledge expertise. What I wish people would understand about skilled immigration. Um, this system is incredibly outdated. That's really the foundation of why so many issues are happening right now. For example, the H1B lottery, it's a lottery, first of all. You don't really have a guarantee of getting a visa.
Right.
It's been that way since 2011, probably. That's when the demand outweighed the supply that was out there. And sadly, the supply of 85,000 visas have not changed in the last 22 years, since
Mm.
2003. So obviously, the population of the world has increased tremendously since then, and there's more people coming into the US. But they haven't been able to pass a single law to change that because policy is intertwined with politics in this country.
Yes.
And that's something we actually dive deep into in the first chapter of my book, Unshackled, where we talk about this 2013 immigration reform that came 2 inches close to being passed. But then it never passed because of politics. And I don't want to, there's a lot of nuance there, so I'd recommend people to read about it. But yeah, I think everything is outdated, and that is because Democrats and Republicans, when they take office, they want to use the limited capital they have to pass certain laws, and these never make to that list. Like legal immigration does not make it to the list on top as much as, I don't know, healthcare or other education reform, slashing student debt. I think those are probably more important on the agenda. That's just my opinion. And also the other reason is legal immigration often gets tangled with illegal immigration.
Mm.
So I do think most Americans, there's been surveys on this. If you go and ask them, do you want really talented people to come into the country legally? They're going to say, yeah, why not? It's a pride. It's a source of pride for America to have people, like us come in here, I think. But it often gets tangled with the other side, which is very polarized. So, Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that what you just shared, especially around the H-1B lottery, is so personal for me. I graduated from graduate school in 2012,
Huh.
and one of my best friends who had gone to IIT in India, one of the best engineers in the world probably, had earned a H-1B sponsorship through Walmart.com. I remember we celebrated for him, we took him out, and then he came to tell me they just instituted the lottery again, and I've lost and I have to go home. And it just shocked me as someone who had grown up here, the idea that you played by the rules, you did everything right your entire life, you studied your butt off, and yet due to the sort of whims of fate, you lost out on this global scale. So, yeah,
Hmm.
totally can see that this is just an infuriating system. What do you want to know more about, Rose?
Oh, there's so much. Only because I will say, like, I have so many friends that are on visas, and I wish I understood, honestly, the landscape more, the process. Like, people will tell me what they're struggling with, and I'm sure you've dealt with this in the last 4 months, like, so much people having trouble making not only career decisions, but also just anxiety, like you said. So, can you, for my sake, and maybe for people who might not be super aware of the landscape, like, can you give us like a quick overview of what the current US visa landscape looks like? Like what are the various pathways that people have to work in the US, live in the US, eventually,
Hmm.
permanently live in the US? Like I don't know what that process looks like.
Okay. Work in the US, live in the US, and permanently immigrate. I'll maybe I'll focus on the working and permanently immigrating because living is kind of a part of that. Working in the US, the H-1B is the most accessible work visa that unfortunately is a lottery process. So everyone knows about the H-1B, and that's because the bar for getting it is very low. All you really need is a degree and a job related to the degree that you have. The other work visa that I wish more people knew about is the O1, which I'm currently on. And the O1, unlike the H1B, has no lottery system. There's no cap. So n number of people can apply for it, and there is no window in which you have to apply. The H1B can only be applied in March of any year. The O1 is open throughout. You can apply from anywhere across the world anytime. Of course, there's always a catch. The catch with the O1 is that it's meant for people who have been doing really great work in their fields. I mean, you have to check certain criteria. They call it, there's 8 criteria for this. Without going into the full details, I'll just say if you had, say, raised funding for your startup, if you have been covered in press, in media,
Mm,
if you have published journal articles or white papers or just blog articles in reputed publications, these are all things that they consider as extraordinary. And when I say they, this was written in 1990 and has not changed since then.
wow.
So in 1990, a bunch of people got together and decided, okay, we want to attract really talented people to this country and give them a visa that doesn't require a lottery. Who do we think is extraordinary? And they thought people who checked these kind of things are back then. But the world has evolved since then. There's people who are entirely making living out of being an influencer these days, or an AI prompt engineer. It wasn't existing back then. So they've made some changes to accommodate these, but it's still outdated in some sense. But that's the O1 visa. The third work visa people can use is probably the L1, I guess. L1
Mm,
is an intra company transfer. What that means is you can't just get an L1 from within the US. You have to have worked abroad for a year. And then your company has to have a subsidiary or an affiliate in the US and transfer you. Like when Apple transfers an employee from India to US, they probably use an L1. That's the third. And the fourth visa could be the F1 OPT. OPT is actually a work visa students can use to work after graduation, but only for 12 months. And finally, there is something called the IEP, which most people don't know about, International Entrepreneur Parole. It's not a visa, but it lets you build a company for up to 5 years in the US. You can, but only the catch there is only if you'd raised funding of about $270,000 from qualified investors
huh.
and you own at least 10% of the company. There are some restrictions, but they introduced that to encourage more founders in the US.
Can I ask a question about the lottery? And maybe because I don't really know that much about the lottery system. What are the chances someone gets picked? Like I guess in my head, I thought it was, like you said, low bar. But for me, it's like, if it's a low bar and there are a lot of people that are applying, I'm assuming the stats are low, which is scary for me.
Yeah. Well, can you guess how many people? What's the chance?
I literally, it could be anywhere from as little as 5% to as high as, is it
No,
5%?
it's
It
not
can't be
five
not 5.
percent.
Oh my
Thankfully,
God.
I think. Let's see. In 2023, it was 10%. So that was the
Oh my God, that's
lowest
so
it came
low.
to.
Wow.
Because in 2023, people kind of rigged the system by putting in multiple applications for the
I was
same
just like
person.
TCS and Cognizant and all these like big
Yeah,
outsourcing firms,
they're
or was it?
generally referenced in this context.
Yeah.
I mean, they do, like, they, if you look at the list of employers with the top applications, they are already always on the top three or five.
Yeah.
But then in 2024, they changed it in such a way that even if 10 companies apply on your behalf, Rose, they'll only consider one application for you because they began asking you to give your passport number. So that way they can identify you
Yeah.
to that. So that brought down the number of applications by half, and it increased the percentage to maybe 20-25%. And this year is
Okay.
the same. I would say this year it's been 25%. So
Wow.
I
But
still think that's pretty low.
yeah, let's just let that sink in for a second, right? Like that means 80% of the world's best and brightest have come to the US, have gotten jobs with American employers, and we're still told to go home at the end of the year. Is that a correct way of phrasing that?
the only nuance there is we don't know if it's the best and brightest because it could still be TCS, Infosys, or any other consulting
Sure.
firm putting an application on your behalf. So it's not a merit-based system. That's the problem as well. Is that
Right.
it's not a level playing field in a way, because someone who is the best and brightest might be competing against somebody else who paid a startup just to get an application to be in the US. So I actually think Canada does a better job in this. They do a merit based immigration where if you had a master's degree, it gives you X points. If you knew how to speak English well, it gives you Y points. So they stack up points based on your what they think is merit.
So, given all of that, and then everything that's happening right now, what would you tell someone who's reading the news today?
It's more than ever. I think sensationalism has taken a center stage, and I am also a victim to this in a way because I try my very best to not check any social media. But let's say once in a while I might log into Instagram. The first thing I see, it still like hooks you in. And I think we don't have as much patience for nuance anymore. So I would just like beg people not to only read the headline of any story, rather go and understand the nuance of a story as to, okay, let's say you see a story that says X student visas have been revoked. Instead of just taking that at face value, go and read about who are these people, why was this revoked, and is this final? Could this be changed in court later on?
Hmm.
What could come after this? And finally, who is the best person I can talk to about this? And the answer to that always is immigration lawyer. A lot of people reach out to me asking for legal advice, and I always tell them, look, like your situation is so specific that I'm not a lawyer. All I have done is read a lot about this and I've been creating content. It does not make me a lawyer or credible enough to share legal advice. So, and people are hesitant to reach out to lawyers because number one, they charge
Yeah.
money, and number two, I think people feel another immigrant is more relatable than an authority figure lawyer.
Hmm.
When you think lawyer, you're thinking somebody in a suit, very official. But I actually think there's so many lawyers who are very extremely immigrant friendly and they just want to help people. So I would always just give a few names of lawyers they can reach out to. But I would just say people like I've seen so many Reddit posts where people would go and say, my uncle just got this notice from USCIS. What should he do? Reddit is not, they're not lawyers, they're just people. So don't take advice from people who don't have the authority.
Good advice. Good advice.
In some of that vein, I actually, now that you're kind of talking about, advice and stuff, what is the worst advice you've heard people give about the process? I'm sure you've heard so many
Oh,
because there are a lot of
wow.
like influencers and people, but like I would love to because you must have heard ridiculous stuff like
Huh.
I'm not gonna
Actually, I've
fill in
never thought
blanks.
about this question yet. So now I'm thinking, what was the last bad advice I got from people or I've seen on out there? I guess I'm fortunate enough that I don't really subscribe to a lot of people who give bad advice, but there are people who hype things up. So I'm actually going to use myself as a scapegoat and give you an example where I made a mistake and wrote something that focused more on being sensational than being right. And I also, apologize for it there. I wrote something like a judge dismissed a lawsuit against the H4 EAD program. H4 is what people who are married to H1B holders, that's the visa they have. The EAD refers to a work permit that they can get. So I wrote, judge dismissed a lawsuit against the H4 EAD program, continuing to let spouses of H1B holders work in the US. That was the opening sentence. A lot of people assumed this meant you didn't need to go through the EAD process to get the work permit anymore. Because just because you have an H4 visa doesn't mean you can work. You still have to get the work permit, which takes 9 months sometimes. So the way it was phrased was very confusing, and people thought, "Oh, this means I don't have to go through the 9 months anymore." And a lot of people in the comment section said, "This is very misleading, the way you've quoted this." So I went back and added a caveat saying, you still need to be married and you still need to go through the process. All of this is still true. But very simple. And of course, only applies to people who understand the nuance. But even someone like me who I consider is above average in terms of trying to understand context and putting out nuance, it's you fall into the sensationalism trap. So I think the worst advice is coming from anybody who focuses on that instead of the context.
Great. Let's flip that around for a second. A lot of the people listening to this episode are going to be international students who are coming to the US, maybe for the first time in 2025. If they wanted to keep their eyes on the prize, be really focused on pathways that are pretty successful, what would you be encouraging them to think about? What's some of the best advice you could give them in this
Hmm.
current moment?
Assuming they're already here and let's say they're starting in fall 2025. So
Right.
assume that. One of the quotes in my first book, it was called Admitted. It was about helping people study abroad. One of my favorite quotes from that is, anticipate difficulty and start early. Anticipate difficulty, start early. I think that really has only strengthened with time. It's like it aged like fine wine, that quote. Because people feel a sense of high when they get into the dream university. They feel like I'm on top of the world. And then they come here and realize, wow, I'm just starting to climb another much bigger mountain. And I'm not ready for this. So I want to first normalize that. I think everyone feels that way. And it's almost, you can't climb a mountain without having, heaving a few breaths. It is going to be hard. But they can really save themselves a lot of trouble in the future by, number one, having a community. I do think most people do this. Like they form a community when they come to this country. I certainly did. But I just want to emphasize more on the idea of, a lot of people are jealous of each other because you get a job before me and I have to wait later. And that really gets to you. It kind of starts eating at you that, wow, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough. But it's not a zero sum game, really. Sure, the H1B lottery only has 85,000 slots, but there are other visas like the O1 that are unlimited. The O1 is entirely in your control from day one. Like, if you do good work in your field, you will get the O1. It's just a fact. If you do good work, if you put forth a good application, they will give you the O1. So, yeah, I do think people fall into the mindset of zero sum game, jealousy, and trying to best the other person instead of working together and helping each other. That's what I wish I had done more of when I was at Columbia. Is instead of looking at who's getting a job next, working with everyone and helping each other by saying, hey, here are the resources I came across today. What about you? Can you share anything you came across? And I'm curious, Rose, you're in an MBA, like business school right now. Do you feel like that mindset is still there among students, or it's you guys are more advanced?
Yeah. Oh, I would say advanced. Oh my goodness. So as soon as you said all of that stuff, my initial thought was, oh, hun, you are describing human
Yeah.
Right.
beings because I talk to people all the time. I feel like I'm constantly telling people, don't compare yourself to people. Don't compare yourself to people. And like my parents kind of raised me as like somebody to always look at the person that is doing better. And I always say like, someone will always be doing better than you. And if you have that mindset where you're constantly comparing up, you will never be happy. So when I was younger, I kind of made this like very distinct choice of don't do that. And business school, whether or not you're an immigrant, everyone is so incredibly competitive. And, when you're going to social events, the first thing people always ask, like I make a joke, like I can't go to a single event where someone's not asking me why I came to business school, what field I'm currently in, and what I plan to do with my business degree. Because we're all kind of sizing each other
Yeah,
up,
yeah, yeah.
right? I say we because I am a business school student. And I've talked to a lot of people and they feel a sense of career shaming, right? Like you have to fit into specific corners of, the career spectrum to be considered successful. So I like what you said, which is like, who cares? And essentially, right? Like you should do what you think is what you consider success. And that's what my next question to you was, despite all of this, because you went to Columbia, which is, it's an Ivy League. Like you went to an Ivy League, you are, around incredibly successful people who want to do successful things, and who care about prestige. Like that is something that's really important to a lot of people. And you ended up, doing a lot of like, you're writing a novel, you found some companies, like I'm assuming you could have gone to like the traditional, I don't know, investment banking route because a lot of people love that stuff, or the
Oh boy,
consulting, or
yeah.
like tech, or whatever, right? And you decided to not do that. So, like, when you described yourself as like, I'm really unfocused in my career, I was like, no, you're exploring and you're staying true to yourself. So, what kind of got you with being in all of that? How did you, make the decisions that you've made in your career?
Great question. And I almost, if you don't mind, I want to say something to your earlier point about people are always sizing each other up. You mentioned that, right? There's one person I've met in life who made me realize it's actually possible to have zero jealous bone in your body, no jealous bone in your body. And I also think meeting someone like that makes you realize it's possible. Like I can get there too. And that person actually is the inspiration behind my third book, my novel, Thousand Days of Love. So I do think for you to stop being jealous, it helps to be around people who are 10 steps ahead of you in that journey. Because if I'm around someone who is positive, who is really helpful, it would be very hard for me to be bitter to that person. It's kind of it's a vibe that you get from that person. So I thought of that. The decision I've made quite a few decisions. I think the inflection points in the last 5 years were deciding to quit my job, deciding to write Unshackled specifically because I was not looking to write a book on immigration or build a immigration tech startup. Or I wanted to build an educational technology company, something around what the future of learning online could look like, very different from what I'm doing right now. That was the second one. Third one was deciding to take a step back and write this novel. So three inflection points, and I guarantee none of them made sense during the inflection point. In the first few weeks when I decided to write Unshackled, the novel, or even quitting my job, even though I knew with certainty that I was never meant to be in corporate. So I knew quitting was the right choice. It doesn't make it easy though. It's still hard after you quit. So yeah, during that phase, it feels very humbling. It really feels like you're entering a salsa dance class and you're learning how to move your body when everyone around you is already an advanced dancer. And it feels like you're back to square one, starting over again. Because I've done it a few times now, the next time I know I'm in that phase, at least I can tell, look, you've done this before, you can do this again, and there is a reason why you're doing this. But in hindsight, I do think it's what you said, is following your curiosity versus following what somebody else thinks you should be doing, even if that somebody, and especially if that somebody is your parent, which a lot of us have. You said you grew up in a household where your parents passed on their dreams onto you. I think a lot of our parents do that. They pass on their unfinished dreams onto us. Especially if you're. My parents grew up in abject poverty. So, of course, they cared about me having a stable job. They were not at all happy when I quit my job.
Mhm.
Now they've come around to it. It's been a while, but not back then. And so I think going against everyone telling you you're making a mistake and still having conviction is quite hard. And it only happened in my case because Rajesh, who is the person I talked about, he was there with me throughout, telling me that I got you, don't worry. Like, I'm here to help you. So having one person like that changes everything.
Wow. I love that story, Soundarya. Thank you for sharing that. And
Thank
most
you for
importantly,
asking.
thank you for sharing all this expertise and wisdom with the next generation. If someone is listening to this and they want to learn more about what you talked about, your community, your advice on these topics, where can they go to learn more?
Yes, so we have a ton of free resources under unshackled.club. That's unshackled.club. So they can go there, and there's a free newsletter, webinars, events, and courses. So they can go to any of that. Personally, I am pretty active on LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube. So people can reach out to me on any of those platforms, and I respond. So
Okay, and then one last thing, because I must know, because you keep talking about your novel, I need to understand who it's about, or not, don't tell me who it's about, because I think you just kind of explained that it was about Rajesh, but I would love to hear about 1000 Days of Love, because this is something I will definitely read.
that's thank you so much. I actually just finished the second draft as of 3 days ago. So thank you. I was on a farm for 8 months working on this. Best 8 months of my life. I love the solitude on farms. In one sentence, the novel is, what if the greatest love story ever written wasn't romantic? That is the kind of the novel. So, because the moment I say love story, people think Romeo and Juliet. Guy falls in love with girl, seeks out the girl, and eventually girl says yes. I wanted to flip that narrative because in this novel, the love is happening between a 25-year-old young girl who is depressed and lonely and a 52-year-old old man who has Parkinson and is dying. He knows he's dying. And it's about how they fall in love with each other in a non-romantic way and change each other. So that's the story.
That is
Thank you.
beautiful. I honestly like that better than the Romeo and Juliet, because I am not a Romeo and Juliet kind of gal. When I say I'm very picky about love stories. So that sounds great. Excited. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you.
Say, podcasts are, I mean, I do no work really. You guys do the entire work of coming up with questions, recording, editing, posting. You're giving an opportunity to me to get to just sit back and reflect on my life, which is such a gift for me. So I love going on podcasts, and thank you both so much.
Great. We love it.
Okay, wow. That was a hard hitting episode, Rose, because I feel like, it's one thing to discuss side hustles or quiet quitting. This is like people's lives playing out through the way our immigration system works. So I'm curious to get your take on all of this, especially vis a vis everything happening right now in Washington.
Yeah, I also can, first I will say I'm so grateful that she came on. I think this is a very touchy topic. A lot of people I've talked to are really afraid of saying anything, right? Because they are afraid that they're going to get deported any day. So I'm glad that she shared with what she could. To go back to like the title of our episode, which is the American dream still for immigrants? I'm going to say
Mm.
no. And I'm going to say this for several reasons. For one thing, I mean, American dream, very outdated term. So like, I'm going to say success, right? Or sense of stability. For me, I would love to feel stable in my own country. And I think and like, what SB said, there's very specific criteria, right? And a lot of them are about like publishing, and do you have, research? And so a lot of it is heavily towards researchers. Like if I were somebody that didn't live in the US, I probably couldn't get a job here or a visa here or qualify for any of that, because I'm a generalist, right? I'm a chief of staff. I'm an operator. I'm not like a successful entrepreneur that has millions raised yet. So that's kind of tough. And it's the 20% is not a lot, Jeremy. Oh my God. I mean, it's more than 5%, but it's definitely not like a coin flip. It's 20%. It's very little. And it used to be 10, she said. So kind of nuts. Yeah. I also I think she's a very inspiring person. I really loved hearing her story. Love the fact that she's kind of gone through this journey of like being in a culture that's very high cooker, competitive. I think a lot of people who are in those environments understand a lot of what she's saying. And it's really hard to not feel like you need to follow a certain path, especially with immigration, right? Like if I had this I remember when I was at Cambridge and I had vaguely considered the idea of staying in London, and there's only specific paths that I could take to be there. And I remember thinking, I hate feeling trapped. I hate feeling like I can't do what I want to do. So yeah, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, very similar. I think for me, as probably for every American, this feels personal. We all were, sort of brought here through our ancestors and the folks who came before us. And the idea that we would sort of close that door for the next generation just feels wrong in a very sort of moral way. That being said, I did like the fact that even in the face of these challenges, she was sort of shining a light on these different ways to get access to opportunity, whether it was the O1 or other visa options. And to that end, I did want to call out Soundarya was super generous in inviting folks to an event on August 15th and 16th. It's at Unshackled.events. And she described it as the Coachella for skilled immigrants. So if you're looking for support and help on this journey, head over to that website. Use code SS20 to save 20% off your ticket. But that said, we want to hear from you most of all. So let us know your thoughts in the comments. And then tune in next week for the next episode of Synergies Sminergies, coming to you real soon. In the meantime, have a great week, y'all.
Bye, everybody.